the fearless boogie. Do the fearless boogie.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Balls in Your Face Marketing. I have with me the lovely and wonderful Lisa McDonald. She's the founder of Living Fearlessly with Lisa McDonald. She's an author and a podcast host. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Balls in your face. Here we go, all in.
Yeah, starting 2020 with a bang.
Well, Happy New Year to you, and I want to thank you very much. We've talked about this for quite some time behind the scenes, and you've been immensely gracious, and I've been very much looking forward to this. I think you're quite the spitfire, and the caption was enough to draw me in, so thank you.
Yes, no, I know. It's been. I've been looking forward to this as well. This is a great, actually, the timing is great because you are going to be the final guest that I have for season 2 of this show. Now,
Fantastic.
I've been doing this show for a little while, and I get a lot of value out of it just by doing it. I've never monetized it. I've never done anything with it to make money. Your show is, so I'm very curious to hear from you about, because I know a lot of people are encouraged to start a podcast. But it's interesting that the fact that you've got one that is monetized, that you're profiting from. So I'm curious to know a bit about how you did that, what your recommendations for doing that are.
Well, I appreciate that. That's actually a question that I'm more recently getting inundated with. And in fact, I am coaching, I coach a whole plethora of people from different walks of life for different reasons. But more notably, what's coming out of the woodwork now is fellow radio show host podcast, knowing that this is my business model and I've managed to amass this for myself, whereby they're wanting to scale and leverage in such a way that they too can be a pay-to-play business model. So this is part of my mentoring coaching repertoire for who I'm interfacing with. So I'll give you a bit of the backstory because that's really what catapulted this. So as a result of my reinvention process, which was necessitated on desperation because there had been a change to my marital status in 2011, my children then aged 3 and 18 months old. And so, I mean, you didn't have to tell me, but it was made very clear from a legal standpoint that once both my children became full-time school-aged, the expectation was that I garner an income. So prior to that, prior to being a stay-at-home mom, which I was very fortunate to have the luxury to do because not everybody has that choice, I had for 25 years dedicated myself in the vocation of social services, crisis management, specifically within senior management roles. So the last position I exited from social services before becoming a stay-at-home mom, then catapulting into a single mom and then into entrepreneur, was I was a director of 2 of Edmonton's largest women's shelters out in Alberta. So that was women and children fleeing domestic violence. So I had pretty much for the span duration of 25 years, I'd always been very much immersed in personal growth, personal development. I was always about advocacy. I was always about empowering other people to empower themselves. And so fast forward to 2011, when I was in that position of having to take a look at my transferable skills, figure out very, very quickly what was I going to do to garner an income, bearing in mind that my circumstances of forecasting my children were going to have stat holidays, they were going to have sick days, they were going to have all those things. So although I'd always kept my networks alive and my connections alive in social services, and there was always an open door policy to return, I just knew it wasn't going to be conducive, because if I was to go back, it was going to be to re-enter into the management level. And I didn't want to be one of those unfortunate, not through my own fault, but be one of those hypocrites where you're reprimanding people and talking about, attendance issues when I'm the one who's not coming in for whatever the reason, legitimately where my children are concerned. So I took a look at my transferable skills. Because of my previously held positions, I was always, in many cases, the person that was being interviewed. I was the person being quoted. I was no stranger to the camera, to the mic, to any of those things. And so I started out primarily in 2012 with 4 children's books. I banged out content for 4 children's books, ended up getting them into corporate. It was my first ever personal website that had been designed, and as a result of my website being out there, I got sought out by the network owner, Cameron Steele from the Contact Talk Radio Network, he then embarked upon having a conversation with me, which involved, have you ever considered being your own show host? To which, of course, at that point in my life, no, I had not. So once that started happening, I knew that I was going to take this big. This was not going to be a hobby. Although I'm very impassioned by what I do, it really had to be with the mindset and the projected vision of this needs to eventually monetize. But I know that I need to pay my dues. I need to establish my credibility. I need to get my stats going. I need to get good, caliber, recognizably, internationally recognizable names. And it wasn't just going after top tier people for the sake of namesake. It was really an opportunity to use my platforms to publicly thank these people for the ways they had been instrumental in my own journey within personal growth, personal development, like Deepak Chopra, like Lisa Gibbons. And then it became Jack Canfield. And then it became one person after another whose content I had for decades had on my bookshelves, or whose different services I had been immersed in, masterminds, things of that nature. And so as a result of getting all these top tier people, then unbeknownst to me at the time, fast forward to 3 years into radio, maybe 2.5 years, Jeffrey Hazlett, who's the CEO, founder of the C-Suite Network, the most trusted business network in the world, he was paying very close attention to me. And so he reached out to me and asked me to join his network. So the benefit, first of all, and how I was able to monetize was a lot of people are doing this irrespective or independent of being connected to actual networks, and there's no judgment with that. However, because I'm connected to two networks, the combined listenership for anybody who I'm showcasing on a weekly basis is in excess of 8 million people. I'm heard, my guest and I of each week were heard in 145 countries, 220 TV, radio, terrestrial satellites, and the potential for millions of iTunes downloads. And it's not just iTunes, it's Apple, it's Spotify, it's iHeartRadio, it's all over the place. Any actual hosting platform, I think you can find Living Fearlessly with Lisa McDonald. So then people started paying attention, and they started realizing, as far as prospective guests, thinking, should I reach out to Lisa? And I'm grateful that they have, because now I'm a 95% referral-based business model. And a lot of the people who I've showcased, they've come back in some cases a second, third, or fourth time, because being entrepreneurs who are committed to their own momentous growth, they're always banging out new books, TED Talkers, they've got an upcoming speaking circuit gig, they want publicized, they want massive exposure, so they know they're going to get that from my particular platforms. Because outside of the 55-minute interview, my team and I, we do extensive strategic marketing to ramp up and to announce in advance of the interview itself, which is always scheduled on Fridays. We start ramping this up on the Monday. We have radio guest forms so that we're getting the hashtag correctly, we're getting the affiliate links, we're getting the backlinks, we're getting their suggested items, topics that they would want highlighted within the 55 minutes. We use an app called Buffer. Buffer recognizes that the algorithms and the analytics are different for each social media platform. So we don't just randomly upload when we're pre-announcing who it is that we're showcasing. We get all the information in advance based on the returned radio guest forms. We queue everything up. We've got professional graphics, so we request 2 pictures, one a headshot, second for whatever it is that they want, whether it's a picture at the front cover of their book. We embed that into the graphics, so you're getting the visual, you're getting everything, and it goes up everywhere. So because I am have a generous social media platform, which in combined, it's probably in excess of over 100,000 followers, the guest who I'm showcasing of each week is already getting a lot of buzz. They're getting a lot of attention. They're getting a lot of eyes and ears on them. And then that converts into people wanting to tune into either, if they're in a position to listen to the live show, or conversely, they can listen to the follow-up podcast link, which also gets strategically buffered out following the calibration of it up on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, etc. As a result of doing this, I very graciously was also personally reached out to by Arianna Huffington. So Arianna Huffington was paying attention to me, recognizing my content, recognizing the guests who I was showcasing, etc. And she personally, not her team, but she personally had asked me if I wanted to be a fellow contributor to her site, Thrive Global. which of course I was like, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Truly honored. And because I was vigilant with my content, and of course, once you're welcomed into the Thrive Global family, there's no prerequisite for how frequently or infrequently you upload your content. But because I was doing it very religiously, and I was doing it in addition to all the other balls that everyone knows I'm juggling, that also impressed her. So fast forward to over a year ago now, she reached out to me and she proposed that we change the formatting of what it is I was uploading for content on Thrive Global. And as a way of maximizing my time management, and because things, my bandwidth was really, like I was starting to feel like I was exceeding my bandwidth for getting stuff done and meeting timelines, although I always have and have never dropped the ball on that, thankfully. She said, why don't you do away with your original content, and why don't you do a follow-up feature article inclusive of the podcast link for who it is you're showcasing on a weekly basis, which will drive the traffic back not only to yourself for Living Fearlessly with Lisa McDonald, but inclusively with your guests of each week. And I said, fantastic. And so, although things were already going extremely well prior to her gracious gifting and invitation to me, it's exponentially gone completely vertical. And so, people who know anything about media, anybody who knows anything about exposure, anybody who knows anything about marketing, and for entrepreneurs, and if you're a smart entrepreneur and you're doing things correctly, you will have a marketing budget. And where do people want to put their marketing dollars? They want to put it in a place that they know is going to, they're going to get a return on their rate of investment. And this is why the testimony, outside of the lovely testimonials that I've received from people who I've showcased on my platforms, the real testimonial is when people are willing to pay a second, a third, or a fourth time to come back on my show because they encountered and experienced firsthand the benefits and the residuals of having been showcased the first time. So what I say to people is, and I am living fearlessly, because you will oftentimes, for as many things as you do on social media to, plug yourself. And I say this, be your own hero, be your own shiro, be your own leader, be your own best friend. And so if people don't sense that there's genuine buy-in or conviction for how you view yourself or how you carry yourself or how you perform, then they're going to pick up on that. Energetically, they're going to pick up on that. And we're in an oversaturated market. We're in an oversaturated industry. So there's plenty of people to pick from. But I'm fierce. I'm fierce. I don't care if people think I'm narcissistic. I don't care if people think I'm egoic, which I'm not. But I'm in competition with myself. So I'm here to outdo my own stats. I'm out here to manifest the other people that I'm trying to get. I'm in quarterly contact with Oprah's people who have been very gracious to me. But she's, Oprah's we all know she's one of the most off the hook people on the planet. And, it got to a point where they said, she's not doing interviews right now because she's too plugged in with what she's got going on. But we respect what you're doing. And if there were an opportunity to accept an interview, they would be receptive. I've now got Gary Vaynerchuk, who's going to be coming on my program. We're just looking to cement a date. So I mean, the list goes on. You've got to establish credibility. You've got to increase your social media footprint. Don't be scared to elicit people. Don't wait for people to friend you. You go after people. When you see what people are doing based on their settings being public and their bios being reflective of speaker, in my case, speaker, author, coach, mentor, blah blah blah, then you go after them. And it's not to with the expectation that you're just going to hound them and trump business up right away. It's you want to get it's synergistically wanting to be aligned with the right people who are in your tribe anyway, who get a real pulse and sense and appreciation and respect for what you've cultivated. They then will pay attention to you. Then a nice dialogue unfolds. I don't do business with anyone I don't have a phone call with first, because the energy that transmits in our telephone conversation is perceivably what's going to transmit on the airwaves. And my number one priority is always to my loyal listeners and my podcast subscribers, because they're the ones who put me where I'm at. So you can read very well, but if you're dry as Melba toast on our telephone conversation, and we're not capitalizing on what potentially will be a 55-minute interview, sorry, gotta go.
Well, this is what's cracking me up is that, I mean, because that was just an impressive like you just went. But that was what I recall. I mean, that's the slowed down, calm, tame version of the first time that you and I got on the phone. I thought, okay, this woman has Red Bull, intravenously somewhere. I'm sure you've got one sort of hooked up to your leg or something like that.
IV intravenous every morning.
Intravenous Red Bull. I really like. I mean, it's really quite amazing your ability to one, because you speak quite net about, it's not like you're rambling on. You're covering a lot of points. You just motor through it without much.
You have to. Yeah, you have to, because when people are paying to be on your platforms and you're wanting them to be the spotlight, but of course you're facilitating the interview, I'm very clear on, okay, it's a genuine back and forth ping pong conversation, like for the best interviews, where you feel like you're actually just having a coffee in someone's living room. You forget that you're actually being broadcasted out to millions of people. And that's when you know that you've done your job and you've done your job well, when they forget they're actually doing an international interview.
Right.
So you've got to be very succinct in your messaging. You've got to be very on point. You've got to know not only who your target audience is, but you've got to do your fact checking and your homework on your guest. And you've got to, and generally we're like on the same level. We're vibing at the same level. The energy coming through the airwaves is absolutely incredible. Time goes always so quickly, but yes, you raised a good point. You've got to be very succinct. You've got to unload, you've got to unpack very quickly, and you've got to know what it is you're talking about. And you've got to highlight the key things that are congruent with the guest in which you're showcasing. Otherwise, they're not going to feel satisfied. They're going to think, oh, was that an interview about Lisa, or was that an interview about me? Right? You got to remember what your role is and who the guest is.
But what's funny though is, and I agree with you, that you've got to sort of, but I think for most people, they've got to sort of step it up to this level. You're kind of calming it down so people can keep up with you. I mean, it's unbelievable, because like I said, I've had a one-on-one conversation with you just over the phone. And my goodness, I mean, the amount that you covered in a 2-minute, your 2-minute elevator pitch is about probably what it would take me 10.
Well, I appreciate that. And that might be technically how you define or characterize what I just said, elevator pitch. I'm just so in the zone with what I'm doing, and I don't need to pitch anyone. I mean, honestly, I'm 95% referral based. LinkedIn message box is off the hook. This is how I actually get a good portion of my clients outside of the referrals from those who have already been showcased, who want their colleagues to be successful and get as many opportunities. Because let's face it, Julian, we don't know what we don't know, and that applies to all of us in many various domains and realms of truth. So, it's always about paying it forward, being of service, share the wealth. People don't know what they don't know. So for people who don't know what living fearlessly with Lisa McDonald is all about, or the fact that it even exists, people like you who are generously sharing and opening up your platforms with your audience, this is how we generate the buzz. This is how we get it out there. So, it doesn't matter what I've amassed on my own, or how loyal and committed my followers are to me. I don't take anything lightly. I don't take anything for granted, and I don't get complacent. I don't think, oh, I'm on the gravy train. Things, I take massive action even when things are seemingly all aligned and fit together. And even if I don't have to have somebody on my radio calendar for like 6 or 7 weeks at a time, or I still like to hit the pavement. I don't, I appreciate all the referrals, but I like to do the heavy lifting. I like to do the fact finding. I just love connecting with people. So the fact that you've opened up the door for me, I can't thank you enough.
Right. Well, look, I mean, again, to me, it's you're a dynamic, very charming, excited person. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you're talking about, that people will, that there's this transparency. You can't kind of hide it if you're not really kind of confident about what it is that you're offering, what you're doing.
Absolutely.
There's not that enthusiasm. And so similarly, exactly, you get, when you're in that zone, when you love what you're doing and you're simply passionate about it and you believe in it, you don't have to sell anymore. And it's a similar thing for me.
It sells itself.
It sells itself, exactly. And you just let people kind of come and say, okay, well, what, seems like you're doing, I like what you're doing here. How can you help me? And then you get into that kind of then that leads itself into that sales conversation.
Absolutely.
But
Can I offer another tip, another
please do,
suggestion?
absolutely.
Okay, as far as monetization. So one thing that's I've really benefited from, now this is again, you've got to step into living fearlessly in order to accomplish this. Because people are scared to put their wants and their needs and their asks out there, particularly publicly. And I always have. I did it even before I became entrepreneur. So when I was in the buyout stage of my house and I didn't know how the hell I was going to come up with this or how I was going to do this, the predominant thought that was in my head, I'm using this as an example, because when you're all in, you don't care what people think. You're all in. And so for what my children and I had undergone in terms of doing a trans-Canada move, again, at that time, them being 3 and 18 months old, I was not going to go through the process of having another for sale sign on my property. I just was not going to put my kids through that. I was a single mom. I couldn't imagine showing my house and getting the kids out at odd hours of the night when they should be napping and sleeping and all that. So I put everything out on social media. And I declared it and I proclaimed it. I'm holding on to my house. I am not, it was non-negotiable. And then as it started to pave the way towards specifically the world of entrepreneurship, I'm going after Deepak Chopra. I'm getting Lisa Gibbons. I'm getting Jack Canfield. I'm getting Damon John from Shark Tank. I'm getting Kevin Harrington. Got all those people. And in fact, Kevin Harrington is now one of my sponsors. But the thing is, and sponsorship isn't always about money. So I don't want people to think, oh my God, she's double dipping into like sponsorship. She's getting corporate sponsorship and she's like charging me. No, there's different ways in which to work business deals. So that's what me and Kevin Harrington have done. So anyway, you know, I put everything out there. I use social media as a visionary board. I don't have it privately to myself, just in the walls in my house, because the thing is, we're always within ourselves, and we know that predominantly negative thoughts will try to supersede the positive thoughts. And every time there's a negative thought, you've got to counter it with X amount to eradicate the negative thought. And so because I'm always about empowerment, because I come from social services where it was very much empowering my clients to empower themselves, because I want my children to grow up empowered, particularly as a single parent, you know, I'm like that with my mentoring clients. It's like, you know, I don't allow people to self-deprecate. When people like, they come to me and it's not about victimology and licking their wounds necessarily. It's like they're in the shits and they're like, yeah, I can't get out of this and blah, blah, blah. And they're like defaming their own character or they're questioning their own confidence and everything. And I just sit there and I listen to them and I interrupt them and I said, excuse me, I don't want to hear that. You're not allowed to have that kind of conversation with me. It's not to negate or to minimize your feelings. I'm here to validate you, but let's reframe everything you just said. And let's not forget, this is what makes you spectacular. This is why people are drawn to you. These are your characteristics, your strong suit qualities. This is why people seek you out if it happens to be a fellow entrepreneur or even in the personal realm. You know, people know that you exercise confidentiality. They got their problems, they come to you. It never leaves the four walls. You know, whatever the case may be. So I am always putting myself under potential attack when I use social media as a visionary board. And I declare this, and a lot of people will think, you know, who are you to have such lofty goals? Who are you, from Lisa McDonald from Dundas, Ontario in Canada, a single mom no less, who thinks they can get a Deepak Chopra on their show? I do.
Yeah.
I do, because if you're really committed to personal growth, personal development, and Deepak Chopra and people of the like would tell you the same, there's no hierarchy, there's no status. Once you've embraced yourself, once you love yourself and you're committed to doing the ongoing work on yourself, none of these people were household names once upon a time. And don't kid yourselves in thinking that they didn't fall flat on their face, they didn't have failure after failure, in some cases hadn't gone bankrupt, in some cases hadn't been burned by business partners, books weren't getting picked up by publishers. People didn't like Chicken Soup for the Soul. What kind of title is that? Like, you know, Jack Canfield got rejected time and time again because people thought it was too like whatever. And look at him. I mean, so you've got to believe in yourself, and you've got to be prepared that in the midst and in the wake of believing in yourself, there's going to be the critics, there's going to be the naysayers, but they're not energetically aligned with you anyway. They're not the people who are going to buy your books. They're not the people who are going to give, you know, open the door for you and introduce you to people who can be a game changer for your career. So be very mindful of that. People are going to dislike you and misinterpret you anyway. You're not living for them. You're living for yourself. So this is a gift to even be here. Maximize the potential and the gifts and the opportunities that you have.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious about this.
Look, a lot of that resonates with me. I think one of the things that I really like about what it is that you're doing there, first of all, because one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people doing is that they have, let's say, that initial story, that kind of hardship story up front, and they put it out there, and it gets all this attention, and people are sympathetic, and they kind of lend a hand, and that leads to great things. But then they get stuck in it, right? It's sort of like this, it's the sob story that they constantly tell. And then, and this speaks to exactly, I think, what you were saying about, well, okay, who are the people who are gravitating just towards that? And are they energetically aligned with your success? What you're doing, what I think is the right thing, is to say, okay, yeah, here, this is where I was there. This is my story. This is what got me there. Now I've done this, right? And so you are continuing the journey. You're not sort of stuck in the woe is me, this is my sob story, feel bad for me. But I see a lot of people playing that kind of, and so, but I think what they're doing is they get the sense that they're building up a community. But what they're actually, as far as I'm concerned, doing is really kind of building this almost pity party, right?
Pity party of low vibrational support and low vibrational people, sorry, can I interrupt here for 1 second?
No, but that's exact. I love your language of that, the low vibrational. I mean, that's interesting.
Well, absolutely, because it's a choice every single day, what we give our attention to, and what we give our attention to does in fact grow stronger. So that could be for the positive, and it can be for the constructive, and it can be for the intuitively sound, or it can be conversely the opposite of all of what I just said. It is a choice. And you said something that really resonated with me, and I think about it from time to time as a measurement, a barometer of measuring my own growth. So when I moved back to Dundas, right, and I'm an open book. I've always been an open book. I've always, before things like the term transparency, authenticity, emotional intelligence, leadership, servant leadership. I mean, I was doing all of that, before hashtagging. That was just my life. But when I came back to Dundas and transplanted myself back from where I'm originally from with my 2 children, obviously under very different circumstances in that particular case in 2011, for people who were unhappy, people who I had perhaps childhood history with, people I went to high school with, it's a small town, it was like, oh, I thought my life sucked. I'm so glad I'm not Lisa McDonald. I've got children myself. I can't imagine stepping into single parenthood. And in the case of their dad, who was, very specialized as a careerist, in order to expedite us coming back here to Ontario, in order for him to avoid going the route of headhunters and having a drawn-out, lengthy process, the sister company of where he lived placed him in Madagascar on a 3-year contract, 6 weeks out, 10 days back. So, I really was propelled very quickly into single parenthood. So when I put all this stuff up, I've never done it with the premise or with the intention of, poor Lisa, poor Lisa. I was still positive. I was still putting up witty banter, humorous stuff. Like, I'm a very diversified people. I don't just plug my work. I plug my humor. I plug other people's stuff. I take inspirational things that have really impacted me and I put it up there. But because of where I was once upon a time, I could put something up on Facebook. Let's say, for example, something as superficial as a change to my profile picture, and I could get 400 likes, okay? I step into my own power. I step into my own strategic getting my life together and figuring this out fast out of the gate on my feet, out of desperation, and my success starts to morph and transform. I put up a change, again, for the sake of consistency with my example, I put up a profile picture, maybe 40, maybe 50 likes,
Mhm.
right? People, it's really sad. It's part of the human condition, unfortunately. There are two pods of people. There are people who are so miserable with the trajectory of their own lives and where they currently sit today, failing to recognize this is an accountability piece. I don't blame I'm very amicable with my children's dad. We get along quite well. I don't harbor resentment for what went wrong in our marriage. I accepted it and I moved on, and I learned a lot from that relationship, and I've applied it to every other relationship, not that I've had a lot, going forward. And some people get caught up in they're addicted to pain.
Yeah.
I'm addicted to growth. I'm addicted to growth. Once I've seen what the lesson is, or what the nugget of wisdom is, or the transformational tug from the universe that can, like, okay, you learned something very invaluable that's not only going to be instrumental in your own growth and your own journey, but because I'm wired in such a way, it's like if my solution for self worked for me, and if we use the statistic of divorce, and I'm 50% of the demographic, and unfortunately growing exponentially, then I can help other people. I can help other people. They can take what I offer, or they cannot. But people who are committed to the problem, being problem saturated as opposed to solution focused, people who like the poor you, and all the I'm so sorry. I'm so
Mhm.
sorry. And I'm not talking about, I'm a very compassionate person. I'm an empath. I'm a nurturer. I believe I'm a light worker. I'm a light healer. I'm all those things. But I've infused that with the smartness and the brains of business, capitalizing on my own strengths. So I don't need to be all these yummy things, which a lot of people derive inner strength and inner inspiration from. And simultaneously that equates to being a doormat. No, it does not need to be. I'm a kind, caring person. I'm not naive. I've been duped, trust me. Again, another lesson learned, applied, and I think it's Maya Angelou who says, when we know better, we do better. And Oprah, of course, has capitalized on that too, because they were like sister friends. Maya's now passed on. But it's very true. When we know better, we do better. And so, does it bother me that I don't get all the support? The support? Well, I'm not falling flat on my face anymore,
Mhm.
right? And so the minute I start to thrive, and I mean, the people, and the thing is too, when you're embarking upon your goals, if you're writing a book, for example, I'm speaking to your audience, Julianne. So, if you're embarking to write a book, don't think, oh, I'm just going to get this into my local bookstores. No, you get it out there. You get it
Mhm.
out there. My stuff now, it's global. I'm not here uh, to placate my small town people. And I love Dundas, and I love a lot of people in Dundas. So I'm not disrespecting. The nose isn't up. Lisa's not a snob, but when you're committed to your own growth, you will outgrow people, because not everybody is committed to growth. Not everybody believes in themselves enough to embark upon having lofty goals or doing something larger than life. But don't let that impede your own growth. Don't let that derail you. Step into it and play bigger level. Do international. If you can do international, do international. If you can get your books into another province or another part of the States or whatever, just keep going. Go bigger, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look, I'm definitely aligned with you in that I believe that, the way that we think about things, that we manifest our own realities. So
Mm,
exactly by having that vision, by thinking bigger, the way I put it is, if you think that if you're breaking out on your own, starting your own business, and you think it's going to be a real challenge just to make $50,000 a year, I can almost guarantee you're not going to make any more than $50,000 that year,
yeah, you've
right?
capped yourself.
And what's interesting to me, and I've had Dr. Britton Weingart on this show, who's a neuroscientist who is able to kind of speak to the actual, what we've learned from neuroscience over the last few years. And there's a lot, right? We used to believe in that adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and it turns out that that's completely false. That we've now sort of learned about neuroplasticity and how you can
Yes.
change the way that you think about things, and then through that positive thinking, by exactly replacing those negative thoughts, catching being aware of them, catching yourself having them, all those self-limiting beliefs that people have,
Yeah.
catch them, replace them, envision ahead, have profound impacts on people's outcomes in the end. And what the line that she says that I think is, which explains the science of that, and I think it's very succinct, is in neurons that fire together, wire together.
Very true.
Right.
Very true. Very true. And you said something else that's also, and I talk about this quite extensively on my own platforms, because I too have interviewed experts on the subject matter of neuroplasticity. It's not enough to just do I am statements. It's not enough to just consume or ingest the right books in the self-help section or the business section. You can go through the motions of absorbing all the right things and doing what you're being scripted to do that you've seen work for other people. Why people who go through the motions versus the people who go through the motions but actually believe in everything that they're subscribed to or they're ingesting or they're consuming? The difference being is people who are deemed top-notch successful people, regardless of what they do, they don't have to be a speaker, an author, podcast, or whatever, they have gotten this figured out. They've gotten the subconscious congruent with the consciousness, because this is 90% consciousness. What we're doing in our awakened state is over 90% of how we execute, how we navigate, how we communicate with ourselves, what we do, what we don't do. Repetition is so key. It's the mother skill. Tony Robbins talks about that all the time. So when you go to bed at night, when I go to bed at night, I'm listening to stuff. I'm downloading all the time so that this is getting fed what I'm feeding here in my awakened moments when I turn to chapter 2 of Tim Ferriss's book, or I'm watching something to do with Damon John or other people who are perceivably successful. It doesn't matter if you're mentored up, coached up, and I always recommend that too. Get a mentor, find a mentor, find somebody who's doing and has done and accomplished what you are setting out to do and has done it successfully and perhaps hadn't been successful beforehand. That's who you connect with. But because we spend an exorbitant amount of time on with ourselves in here, you could be in a room full of people, you could be at a mastermind, you could be on a webinar, you could actually be the person speaking on the stage to a sold out audience and still be screwed up here. You've got to get this sorted out. So I fall asleep to things all the time, binary videos, meditation videos, Abraham Hicks, law of attraction stuff, things that are like 4 or 5 hours that I'm going to pass out to, but it's the messaging that's still playing is going to, right? That's my white noise machine. Right? That's my white noise machine. And so once that starts to penetrate over and over and over, and that's part of my evening routine. Everybody puts so much emphasis on a morning routine. When you wake up, do your 15 minutes of meditation, have a glass of water, don't look at your phone. You can't just focus on one aspect of your 24-hour routine. You've got to focus on you go to bed right, you wake up right. You do that every single day and make whatever your autopilot is truly work for you. You're on fire.
Yeah.
People, you're untouchable. You're unstoppable.
It's really interesting because, that was a question that I was asked frequently on shows, what was your definition of success? And ultimately, so I gave it a lot of thought and ultimately came up with the same definition for happiness, in fact, being that it's the optimal integration of being. And so, in other words, what you say, what you think, what you do, your work, your play, your community, et cetera, the more that you are able to align them under a common objective. And so what you're speaking to there, again, I think a lot about too, Freud sort of broke us up into the id, the ego, the superego. So I think that's exactly it, is it's aligning, giving each of those aspects of ourselves their voice. Mm-hmm. Listening to, okay, so this is right, because the ego or the subconscious is very selfish, and naturally so, it should be. So you, but you need, so obviously you can't run your life just based on those sort of subconscious selfish desires. You need that sort of prefrontal cortex rational brain analyze it. But the more that you can kind of integrate all of those aspects and say, okay, here's what my selfish voice wants. Here's what my what is best for my family, what is best for my community, what is best for my business, etc. And to align it exactly so that you're, I think what you're saying there about okay, here's what I envision, here's what I see, what I should want, and now communicate that to you so that that's what your subconscious is also pursuing the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
And in alignment. So that makes sense, a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely. Well, even if you're 80% consistent up here in your consciousness, in your awakened state, and and that's another conversation in itself, because there's a lot of people who are awake but not awakened. I call myself a bit of a shift disturber too. So, but if you're 80% effective up here, but you're trash talking yourself, or what's going back here counteracts what you've worked really hard to establish and to hold on to here, to hone and to master, you're going to be in this vicious cycle where all your hard work is going to be for naught. It's going to get undone every night you go to bed. So you've got to feed this repetitiously, which consistently feeds this naturally, in addition to what you're doing externally to keep this alive, keep it fresh, keep it where you want it to be. But people forget this. This fuels this, right? It's like having a fridge. It doesn't matter if you've got a nice looking fridge in your kitchen. If you don't stock it full of healthy stuff, then you're going to wither away. Like if you're not eating and you're not eating properly, you're going to wither away. So I don't care the aesthetics of what great fridge you have, and if it's got ice maker and it's got all these, it's got a clock and it's like talks bells and whistles. It doesn't matter. If you're not stocking your stuff every day and you're not feeding yourself every single day, you're going to famish. You're going to wither. You're going to disappear. And I mean, and for what? For why? It's so unavoidable. It's so unnecessary.
What I love about this conversation is, as much as, obviously this is a marketing focused show, and I'm very interested to talk about, how you've monetized your channel and so forth. But I think the advice that you're giving right now is sort of universal. It doesn't have to do with even business. It's about just building a better life for yourself, whether, so exactly, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be gaining from this, because exactly, I mean, if anything, I think it's very timely. I think we are as much as social media and technology connects us, people feel more isolated. It disconnects us in a lot of ways, and so people are, I think people suffer from sort of isolation more than they ever did before. I think we're experiencing a sort of an epidemic of depression, all of which this is the solution. This is essentially at the heart of what sort of cognitive behavioral therapy is right now, which has been shown now to be very effective for people who suffer from depression and so forth. But it's catching that subconscious voice, hearing it, recognizing it, replacing it with something that's more positive, more constructive. So it's really good advice, I think, just for anybody, just as a life advice, let alone sort of business and marketing.
Well, and arguably, I don't think you could be truly, I think there have been people who have been successful in business who later on tell the true story of, I was successful in business, I owned this, I had this was my net worth, but I was like freaking miserable and I was burnt out and I was depleted. And so that does happen. You can in fact be successful on the periphery, on the surface, but be spiritually dying inside. So yes, that is possible. People have testified to that time and time again. But you're right. What we're talking about here is you can be successful for whatever you want to endeavor in, providing you see yourself and invest in yourself as the number one priority. So separate from business, before we talk about anything external, whether we talk about goals, whether we talk about intentions, whether we talk about anything to do with that subject matter, it's like, who are you, right? You got to know who you are. People talk about, what is your why? Yes, that's important. There's a lot of things people preface that are important, and there's space. I hold space for all of that. But who are you? If you don't have yourself figured out, if you don't know what your non-negotiables are, if you don't know what your values are, if you don't know what fires you up, if you don't know what is still repressed that's holding you back or is stifling your happiness or stifling your clarity or your sense of focus, you're just adding more, you're compounding your own situation and your own sense of being and your inner stress. If you don't figure out who you are before you take on tackling the world and social media land to build up a business, right? Don't get successful and then burn out and wonder why you're crying all the time, because you failed to neglect. You've neglected this. You've neglected this. You've neglected this. You've neglected this. You've got to take care of this first. You've got to constantly refuel yourself. And if that means cutting out things that don't serve you, things that are counterintuitive to your own growth, your own progress, your own emotional well-being, let it go.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people say, well, Lisa, that's easier said than done. Well, no, to me, it's like, boom, gone. Boom,
Yeah.
gone, boom, gone. Because anybody who understands the fabric of who I am and what makes me who I am, and I'm very public with all of it. I talk about things intrinsically. I talk about things emotionally. I talk about things financially. I talk about things career-wise. So for anybody who's following me well enough to know what I will support, what I will endorse, and conversely, what I will not tolerate, you don't get 3 chances from me. I'm done.
Right.
Done. Because I value my time.
Right.
And I know my own worthiness and I know my own deservability. And when I'm fighting my own fight every day for my kids, essentially, right? I'm a package deal. So if you're going to come after me or you're going to be committed to misunderstanding me or think that it's, Lisa's either got her head in the clouds or Lisa's all about Lisa, if you choose, because it's a choice, if you choose to misunderstand what I'm doing in my plight, my mission, my purpose of uplifting people to fear less and to live more, nowhere in that statement does that say I. I'm always in my blogs, in my content, on radio, I'm always prefacing the we. I'm talking about interconnectedness. I'm talking about the whole. I'm talking about universal synergies. I'm talking about we are all one. So if anywhere in my diatribe, consistent, repetitious diatribe, people have chosen to bypass that or overlook that and just focus on, oh, she's got Jack Canfield this week. You know what? Goodbye. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, look, I mean, it was very funny, with this show, I think I told you, the name came about as sort of a slip of the tongue. It was my tongue-in-cheek sense of humor.
Love it.
I was very cautious. I thought, geez, that's a little risque. Or might offend some people. And in the end, though, what happened was that for sure, I think there's the odd person who said, well, I don't like crude humor. I've had the odd comment like that, but for the most part, the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive. People usually just get a laugh out of it. And similarly to you, it's sort of like sometimes, it's not that I've had successes with this show and with the things that I've done. I've had my failures. It's a roller coaster. Same as you. I don't hide anything. It's not like all roses. But what I can say for sure, without a doubt, is that by simply just focusing on what it is that I love to do, what I'm passionate, what I know that I'm great at, and enjoying it, that sort of becomes its own sort of fulfilling thing. And to this day, this is essentially what in a way started this conversation. To this day, I've been doing this show. I've gotten amazing benefits out of it. I still don't know what it is. I don't know, no, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, will I monetize it one day? Will I get sponsors? Will I start to charge guests? I haven't even decided that yet. Doesn't mean that probably, maybe.
Okay. I need to mentor you.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Well, but I don't. But again, the focus has been exactly on just simply having great conversations, connecting with people, providing value to the audience. What comes of it, we'll see. And also I wouldn't say, it's not to say that nothing has come of it. A lot has come of it. I've gotten speaking engagements as a result, or
Mhm.
been introduced to new people so through it.
Mhm.
So it's already had its return, whether I turn it into something else or not.
Mhm.
But I think what you're right about is just sort of being very clear about who you are, that sort of natural confidence, living fearlessly. I'm all
Absolutely.
for it. I'm all for it.
Two things I'm going to say to what you said, Julian. So first
Sure.
of all, um, another another thing that you and I derive out of doing what we do, putting the monetization, potential sponsorship, all of that aside, okay, even stats, metrics, rankings, all of that aside, what we do day in and day out by having these platforms, by talking about the types of things that are very pivotal and profound for our own growth, our own development, our own integrity, our own clarity, our own focus, our own, all those yummy things that I could talk about at nauseum day in and day out. That's another tool. That's another meditation. That's another affirmation. It's another proclamation. Because every time you talk to somebody on your show, as we are doing right now, and as I do on my show, it's the repetition and it's the reaffirming all the good things over and over again. So it's a one-stop shop. You get to meet phenomenal people. It gives you other additional opportunities that perhaps might have been unforeseen, that might not have been so-called inevitable. You get to learn, grow, and expand with your guest. You're educating and providing awareness and really good content to your listeners. But at the same time, where people who do what we do, and I've corrected people on this, when people say, you know what, I was so busy doing my program, I didn't have time to do my meditation, or I didn't have time to do my journaling. And I'm saying to myself, you got to reframe that. What did you talk about for that whole half an hour or that 1 hour that you interviewed your guest? What did you talk about? Well, we talked about this, we talked about this, we talked about, okay, so if you were on your own in solitude, and it wasn't necessarily meditation per se, but it was like doing concentrated growth on yourself and immersing yourself in the yummy stuff, what would you be doing? What would you be reading? What would you be dialoguing with yourself about? What would you be preparing for the next week's guest or next week's show? It's all interconnected.
Right.
So, and the more clear you become on what is important to you, which gets repeated over and over again as a result of just, and this is just one tangible tool of what you're doing to get this all figured out, right? And this is when we talk to people about the old adage or the cliche statement of walking your talk. We are walking the talk.
Right.
We're walking together. This is us walking in the park right now. Are our legs working right now? And are we getting the physical modality of exercise and stuff? No, but we are exercising this. And you know what? We get this clear, then it's like, oh, I'm so on fire. I've got to go burn off some energy. I'm going to go for a walk after this program with Julian. And before I get settled into my content and meeting my deadlines and things like that, it lends true to every single aspect of what is important in terms of being a so-called balanced human being. The other thing, quickly, what you said with, starting out with calling your show balls in your face. Okay, so for the people who are listening who perhaps might be a critic or a naysayer, I'm a staunch feminist, okay? I've worked with women my entire life. I've been about empowering women to empower themselves. I've been all about advocacy. I very much value my own vessel. I respect my own body. I know my worth. I know my deservability. I'm all about Me Too and the movement and women's rights, equal rights, and all of that. But let me tell you, how brilliant you are to have come up with balls in your face. And I thank you for putting your balls in my face, Julian.
What always cracks me up is that it's the women guests more than the men who will make jokes about it like that will milk it for all it's worth.
Oftentimes they've got, no disrespect, they've got their kahunas in someone else's purse.
Hilarious stuff. That's a lot of fun. Lisa, you're just dropping knowledge bombs at a crazy rate. Where can people find you? What's the best place for people to?
I appreciate that. Well, you and I found each other over on LinkedIn, which is, as I always say, it's my preferred site. It's not my only site. I try to engage people everywhere that they want to engage in at. But LinkedIn is where it converts for me business-wise. But I'm on Facebook. I'm on all platforms, social media-wise. I also, as I mentioned, go live every Friday on the Contact Talk Radio Network. It's I'm on C-Suite Network. I wear a few hats within the C-Suite. I'm up on Thrive Global. I'm a VIP contributor for Arianna Huffington's site, Thrive Global. My website is livingfearlesslywithlisa.com. My email address is lisa at livingfearlesslywithlisa.com. I put my phone number out there because, again, I like to talk on the phone. It's 289-684-7707. I'm in Canada on Eastern Standard Time, so if you're calling somewhere else, put the 1 in front of the number. I can't tell you how many people have called me. I can't get a hold of you. Well, it's long distance. So, and WhatsApp, same phone number. You can reach me through WhatsApp. We can do Skype. Skype is lisa.mcdonald238. I'm all over the place.
You're all over the place. And I'll put links above or below when this gets posted live for people to reach out.
You've been wonderful. You're yummy. I've so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I could talk to you for hours.
Oh, I know.
And
I could easily go on.
I'm gonna bring you on to my show too, because even though I'm monetized, I'm gonna waive that for you. I really am.
Oh, you're so sweet. You are so sweet.
Yeah, and to anybody else who's listening, that doesn't apply to you. I do my freebies for certain people, for certain causes, for certain reasons, and I've reached my quota. So Julian, I'm gonna do a feature article on you on Arianna Huffington's site, Thrive Global. I'm gonna get you up there as a fellow contributor. I know a lot of people, as I mentioned, who I'm mentoring. In the radio podcasting world, similar to yourself, I can establish those email introductions, get you a succession of interview opportunities who don't have a pay-to-play business model. So, I mean, it's a gift that keeps on giving, right?
You are wonderful. Thank you so much. That's so sweet and kind of you.
Okay, well, we'll talk about scheduling for you and my show.
Awesome. So everybody check that out. Living Fearlessly with Lisa McDonald. Again, look for the links above or below. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving me your time.
I can't thank you enough on this Friday morning for putting your balls in my face. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.
Balls in your face right now.